Okay, I'm live again. Okay, we're live. Okay, I'm live again. Okay, it's working. All right. I want to apologize to my audience here. There we go. I would like to apologize to my audience for that interruption, that disruption. There were some problems with the internet. It went out for a while. I reset the router and I've started another stream up. So yeah, I do apologize to those of you that are watching, that watch me a lot, for that. It just happens from time to time. So I'll go ahead and watch some of these videos that Brucey Caboots and Boone sent me. I'll start with Brucey Caboots' video, but again, I'm really sorry that that happened. I cut out. There's some bad issues with the internet connection. I don't think that even have a lane cable plugged in to the router would change anything. It's just really bad. The bit rate, I constantly have to set the bit rate to make sure that it works properly. So there's internet issues and stuff. I'm really kind of getting tired with Mario 64. It's kind of starting to grow a little bit old on me. Anyways, so Brucey Caboots sent me a link to this, the Cauldron Pool Show.
But people didn't want to be seen as anti-vaxxers. To be an anti-vaxxer in Australia is like the worst of sins. It's like being seen as a racist. It's just something that nobody wants to be associated with in any way. So because we gave a voice to those who had concerns was the right thing. But for some people, it just dissociated the church with something which they find anathema.
Okay, so I'm guessing that these are Christian anti-vaxxers. These are Christian anti-vaxxers or something. I'm not for sure where they're from. But, yeah. Don't get vaxxed. I mean, if you want to get vaxxed, go ahead. It's irrelevant.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Ray. Welcome to the Cauldron Pool Show. This has been an episode in the making, let me tell you. We have been trying to get all four of us on here for quite some time. We actually did manage to do that a while ago, but due to technical difficulties and everything happening all at once, we had to postpone and reschedule. And today we're doing that. And today's episode is all about the Ezekiel Declaration. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I would like to introduce the guests today. We have three incredible Australian ministers joining me. We have Matthew Littlefield, we have Tim Grant, and we have Warren McKenzie. So I just want to thank you all for coming here. I'm aware that we're all on here together, so I might start off with you, Tim, if you could sort of introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Tim and I'm the pastor of Mount Isa Baptist Church. We've been here for 3 years. It's a wonderful church to us, and a wonderful location. I've been a youth pastor for over 10 years, and I've got a wife and 3 girls. My wife homeschools, and so it keeps us fairly busy between pastoring and my wife homeschooling and everything else. So happy to be on today.
Awesome. And how about yourself, Warren? Are you able to sort of introduce yourself for our audience as well?
Sure, yeah. I'm Warren McKenzie and pastor for Biota Baptist Church in Inala, Brisbane. We're a small a local church, and my family and I.
Kind of
Role in the future as well.
Mm.
So that was the first point. The second point was that a good portion of the population had already been burdened by lockdowns, and that lockdowns followed by lockouts would just really break a lot of people. To say that, for my personal choice, I'm not going to be vaccinated, but now I've been locked down for X amount of time, and now I can't do anything. And that happened, particularly in Northern Territory and big Melbourne as well. The third point was, this was conscience. A major distinctive in Baptist theology is to provide liberty of conscience. That says that the state can't answer for me before God. Another person can't answer for me before God.
Okay, this is the problem with Baptist theology. It's very stupid. Baptists believe that they have like some kind of freedom of conscience, and they believe that their actions are only indicative and answerable only to God, which is actually not true. This is actually not the correct biblical position. So these people are confused about theology, and I'm not going to watch any more of that. I understand that the anti-vax thing, the anti-vax movement is it's a lot like the QAnon theory. It's a wasted theory. It's completely pointless to try and to find any kind of discernment about it, but you don't have the freedom of conscience. You don't have the freedom to decide what people on earth should or shouldn't say to you because of your religious convictions. God puts tyrants in power as a way to punish people for their lack of faith in God. It's a form of divine punishment. The people are given the governments that they deserve by God, and you do not have freedom of consciousness. That's a LARP. You might have some free agency, but it's debatable. But you do not have the freedom to simply do whatever you want simply because of religion. You have to be obedient to the authorities. Let me make sure that I'm not live streaming this. Good. So, Plate Gang does not exist anymore. It seems. I don't know. I haven't had any contact with Plate Gang for a long time, for months now. But it looks like Plate Gang does not exist anymore. But anyways, yeah. If you feel that you are convinced and you pray and you have good faith in God that you shouldn't take the vax, then don't get the vax. If you pray to God and you feel like that you do need to take the vax, then take the vax. It doesn't matter. Do what the Spirit drives or commands you to do. What's up, Thievius Slick? You're just poor. According to God's plan. Exactly. Okay. What was the video that Boone sent? Let's see here. I can't see my chat. Shove a chicken wing. No, somebody please shove a chicken wing down my throat. I'm very ill. I don't know how much longer I can endure. Yeah. Let's see here. Boone, could you send me the quote? Could you send me a link to the video if you're watching? Somebody sent me a link. It was Boone. He sent me a link about the Georgia Guidestones, and I can't find it. So that would be helpful. Keno Corner.
$259.45. Sick.
From the child prodigy PPP.
$2,000 and you'll get the starfish. $2,000 no. I'll starfish right now.
Oh,
We can
wow.
all move on with our
Wow,
lives.
starfish, wow.
We can all move on with our lives.
Okay.
Maybe $3,000. We need probably $3,000 because we're gonna get a
The
strike.
problem is, I believe it with,
Well, don't
as I said,
forget-
PPP can
You
sell a
were out for
kayfabe, but
10.
Warski's too much of a retard to do it. So I don't know.
What the fuck?
Is it just plug it in?
I did.
Is it not working?
I don't know what the fuck. Why is it not?
Yeah.
Listen, man.
Yeah.
There's got to be some way.
This thing was fucking Walmart bullshit, dude.
I'll
Well,
buy
and
that.
surely, like you told me, it was like a great speaker.
I did not say
You
that.
told me it was like
I
one of
said
your
it should be
IRL
good.
speakers.
I
You
said
were
it
like,
should be fucking
you
good.
said you were the
Well, why is it
master
not
of
fucking
the speaker.
discoverable? What?
Okay, he's just dude. He's watching. He's stream sniping PPP trying to starfish with Warski. I don't want to see that, dude. All these people are such no lives. This is not interesting to watch.
Just
Hang on.
Todd's key behavior. Also, should I say Smartsky? Sorry.
It's paired.
Is it paired?
It said paired.
Okay,
But
well.
I don't even think that's actually the fucking thing.
Fuck. What the fuck is this shit?
Hold on, we're
Fucking
hitting
Walmart bullshit.
Hold on.
Oh, I paid for
Oh, you have to
cheap
add it,
Chinese
right?
shit,
Yeah.
and it's not
Try to
working.
pair it now.
The fuck?
There it is.
Okay, well, it looks like I have been blocked on the Keno corner, so I will respect him blocking me by also doing likewise with Euros. And it's just the same crappy content, bro. What's up, Brucey? I've heard Mormon Shaggy's dad mushes up his food in a blender and then administers it through a IV in Shaggy's arm, unironically. He does, bro. Oh, that's hilarious, bro. Yeah, he does. He does, bro. So, yeah, the Keno corner has no Keno at all. It needs to be called the Sus Carnival. And Euros is a complete pushover. Euros is an absolute pushover and a coward. And also a two-faced liar, to boot. But, yeah, enough with him. What's this Windows 8 anime?
Well, 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 would you look at this? We're talking about some more anime-related stuff today. Can you believe that? But it's not on this CD again. No, no, no. We're going to be talking about something much greater than that. Today's video sponsor, Linode, who I'll be talking about later on. For now, though, hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Now, in today's episode, yes, we're diving into the world of OS X once again, because something tells me you guys really liked the last video I did on this Windows 7 OS X CD. And for those of you who didn't see it, you can check it out here, but for those of you who did, we're going to be diving into the Windows 8 side of things today. Let me introduce you to Yu and I Madobe. Yes, they share the same surname as Nanami here, which lets you know that they're all just one big little family. And yeah, just like Nanami, these two were not actually created by Microsoft themselves, but they were used as promotional and marketing material in Japan, especially on Windows 8's launch, because if you went to the launch party / event thing, you could get armbands and mugs and see people cosplaying as them and whatever you want to call this. It sounded like an amazing time. And if you purchased a DSP license of Windows 8, you could walk away with one of these little bundles right here. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Not only did you get a CD, much like the Nanami Madobe one right here, in this package, but you also got a Microsoft Wedge mouse, a customized Microsoft Wedge mouse at that. And unlike this CD, which contains a couple of audio tracks, the one in here actually contains a desktop theme. So on the box, you've got Windows 8 Pro branding. Makes sense. It lets you know it's a DSP or Delivery Service Partner license. This little blurb right here is talking about a promotion they were doing relating to Nanami here. Hey, it's the Windows 7 Mania people again. Yes, I believe they were involved with the creation of these girls as well. We also, if we flip this over to the side, we've got a list of contents. We do have everything in here this time around. Same thing on this side here. And if we flip it over to the back, we've got that really awesome Windows timeline that we also saw on the Windows XP 20th Anniversary Special Edition that I did a video on.
When was this made, actually?
But I just tried it to change a variable, you know, what operating system we were applying it on. It didn't make a difference. It did nothing on Windows 8.1 as well. We've got 3 folders. This first one is all of the audio files. You've got 3 folders actually within the audio files folder, and we will come back to this because there are a decent amount to go through. We've got this second folder here, which contains the 3 desktop wallpapers. And this third folder has the picture password image. What we can also do is copy over the .desk theme pack file. What you can do is rename it to a .cab file to view the contents of it. So say if you didn't have all this other stuff here, you would still open this up and view the images and the sounds and the .theme file right here. Now there are far more sounds inside of the sound folder on the root of the CD than there are in the actual theme file here. We'll just go through them here. This first folder appears to pretty much be onomatopoeias or kind of trying to mimic sound effects. So yeah, there you go. Now this second one here has more voice lines, and by that I mean, you know, actual like statements rather than just making a noise. So let's just go through them here.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything more than that?
Here
There's some
with
pictures.
the Wedge mouse and what looks like a Microsoft Surface and probably a Lumia or some Windows phone Yeah, this is before Windows Phone was discontinued. Gosh, what a time to be alive. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is them standing in Akihabara. That's my best attempt at pronouncing that, which is where the launch event I mentioned earlier was held. If I haven't said that now, now I've said it. And that's also what these, let me go back here. It's also what these audio files refer to when saying, like, do you want to go to Akihabara? I think she says that in here.
When
Was that it? I think it was this one where she says, like, do you want to go to Akihabara?
So this was released like 10 years ago. Shaggy cannot eat solid food. Boone, do you have that link to the Georgia Guidestones again? I can't find it. Yeah, I can't find that link that you shared on the last stream. I wasn't able to watch it because I had to completely unplug my internet because of how garbage it is. Windows 7 anime CD.
This is a special edition CD that was shipped with certain Japanese copies of Windows 7. It was donated to me a little while ago, and ever since, you guys have been asking me to make a full episode on this thing already. So let's do that. Thanks to Linode for sponsoring this video. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. Now in today's episode, we're going to be talking about anime. Yeah, I bet you never thought you'd hear that on this channel. And believe me, I didn't either. But as it turns out, anime can be linked to just about anything, including computer operating systems. Enter the world of OS Tans, anime-like characters used to personify various operating systems in Japan. Now, they were originally strictly fan art, but eventually saw official use by Microsoft. At least, kind of. Nothing is ever simple on this channel, I've just accepted that now. When Windows 7 launched in Japan back in 2009, images of this OS Tan started to float around online. Her name is Nanami Madobe, which is actually a really clever pun. Nanami contains the word nana, which is one of the ways to say the number 7 in Japanese, and Madobe roughly translates to window side or by the window. So, get it? Windows 7? Yeah, not bad guys, pretty clever wordplay there. And unlike all those previous fan-made OS Tans, Nanami right here is the first to be designed by Microsoft themselves, making her the first official OS Tan. Well, at least that's what you'd get if you went by what the Western tech press had to say about all this, because of course, I got some conflicting information when researching about this whole thing online. Like I said, nothing is ever that simple. You see, most English news articles that I came across were adamant that this was all Microsoft's doing. But if you look at Microsoft's Japanese website from around this time, you won't find any mention of Nanami at all. As it turns out, she was actually created by a company called Techno Alliance, which, according to another source, was affiliated with Microsoft but was not directly owned by Microsoft. They acted as a sales agent for Windows 7 under the name Windows 7 Mania, and it's on their website where we can find all about Nanami and some of the limited edition stuff you could get with purchasing a Windows license. One of those things is this CD, which was given out to the first 77,777 people who purchased a copy of Windows 7 Ultimate DSP. But this is not the only thing they were offering. If you bought the professional edition of Windows 7, you'd be entered into a raffle to win all sorts of tech-related stuff. It's not clear if you also got that with Ultimate, but all of this is just insane compared to what the launch was like here in the US. I mean, this stuff is super cool. And I know this wasn't directly Microsoft's doing, but they had to be involved in some capacity because at the end of the day, this is their product. But it's not clear what their exact role was. Though it appears that Microsoft kind of co-opted Nanami and made her sort of official, I guess? Because if you go to the Facebook page, yes, even fictional OS characters have Facebook pages, it outright says the official Windows 7 tan by Microsoft. There was even this advertisement featuring Nanami that showcases some of Windows 7's features. It even shows you how to build a computer, but not really because all the parts just fly together on screen. Though I'm sure you do a much better job following this than that Verge PC build video. Oh yeah, how's that for a throwback? And there was also a theme pack as well, which we'll talk about in a moment here. But yeah, I know, a lot to take in, guys. Hopefully you got all of that. I tried to go over it as briefly as I could. But yeah, so we're going to take a look at this CD, or at least this CD, because I bought another one that was already open so I could keep this one that Beta Collector sent me sealed. So we'll set that aside. And yeah, so on the front of the CD jewel case, you've got Nanami herself and some Japanese down here that translates to 7-color generator. What is that, you might ask? Well, not to get your guys' hopes up, but there is not any theme pack or anything contained on this CD, if that's what you were thinking. This is strictly an audio CD, as evident by the fact that right here you've got the official audio compact disc label right there. This is just an audio CD, and 7-Color Generator is the name of the song that's on it. There are 2 songs, in fact. One of them is the vocal version, one of them is the instrumental version, but they're both the same song. And the song appeared in that ad that we just talked about. But still, this is a really cool collector's item, or piece of Windows memorabilia, I think. So, yeah, we can also take this sleeve out here and open it up, and you get the track listing and the vocals. You also got a cat over here, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, definitely some really nice artwork, I think. They did a really great job, whoever it was that ended up designing all of this stuff. So yeah, that is the CD. Let's go ahead and switch over to a virtual machine and take a look at the theme pack. Alright, we've got a fresh install of Windows 7, and you see we've got 3 folders over here. We'll get to these 2 a little bit later on, but we're going to start with the theme pack right here. So it comes in a .themepack file, and all of this has already been archived. If you guys want to download this from the Internet Archive, you can just head over there. That's where I got it from. So we're going to just double click on this, and there we go. It's applied the theme pack. So you're going to hear a lot more of that. You see it just shows up as theme here under My Themes, so it doesn't name itself Madobe Nanami or Nanami Madobe or anything like that. And this is one of the wallpapers, so you see you got her, you've got what appears to be like a touch screen, or maybe she's drawing like a, you know, selection box. You got some photos here around the side, and we'll go, I believe there's 3 desktop backgrounds. So here's the other one. This is like a Windows Media Center focused thing. You got the logo up here, you've got what appears to be a screenshot from Windows Media Center, and some Japanese text here. She's holding a cat. She's got, I believe that's the Windows Media Center remote. Yeah, she's got that. And this one is recommended to PC hardware with Windows 7. So you got some English here. We'll move these folders out of the way. We'll move them down here. Fine experience, USB flash, BitLocker to go, VGA, WDDM 1.1, Direct3D 10, DXVA HD, new entertainment, TV tuner, monitor, multi-touch, high performance, CPU, multi-core 64-bit, boot drive, solid state drive. So they recommend apparently getting a TV tuner. That's not really needed for a lot of people, but I mean, it is nice to have. And you got her once again here with the...
What is this one? iPhone with
This might look like a regular iPhone 2G, and that's because it is. This is a regular iPhone 2G. There's literally nothing special about it at all. At least on the outside. But today we're going to be talking about what software I have installed on this thing. A prototype user interface that was used by Apple during the iPhone's development, known by Skankphone. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. You know, iPhone prototypes seem to be all the rage right now. It's almost as if the iPhone is like 15 years old or something. So I decided I'd pull out one of the more interesting pieces of my Apple collection. A non-prototype iPhone 2G running some prototype Apple software. Now I first figured out how to get this installed on here back 5 years ago when the iPhone celebrated its 10th year anniversary. And so I made a little video about it, and guess guess what? Nobody cared. So we're doing this again 5 years later, and we're going to do a much more in-depth look at this thing than I did in that original video. But first, a little history. During the iPhone's development, Apple actually split up the hardware and software development teams to where they would have essentially no interaction with one another. This is the software that the hardware team used to test various functions on the prototype devices during development. And it was done to compartmentalize the iPhone development process and make it to where if there was, say, a leak on the hardware side, nobody would have the full picture, and the only people that did were high-level Apple executives. So let's go ahead and go through this and just explore what functionality you had here with this prototype interface. So at the top here where it says num is presumably where your phone number would be if you had a valid SIM card in here. You've got your signal strength up here, your current time, which is not correct, your serial number down here, and then you've got a rotating list of messages, which is really funny. You got say hello to the nude message pad 3000, 9 parts perspiration. It just cycles through all these messages. And then here you've got your version number. The main event though is obviously all these buttons here in the center. You've got phone, SMS, web, media, network settings, power settings, more other, playground, test tools, and operator. So if you go to phone here, this is where you would test to see if the unit could actually make phone calls. Now obviously it's going to say disconnected because there's no valid SIM card in here, so we can't actually make a phone call, but we can still dial here if we want to and pretend like we're making a phone call. So let's maybe dial, 123456789 and let's try to send. So you see it just gets rid of whatever number you have in here. There's also no dialing sound like you have on Springboard, which is the final user interface that the software team developed. We're not on silent, so I've got silent mode turned off. That's your phone dialer. We also have, interestingly enough, this is how you access the camera. There's not an option on the main screen here to get to the camera. So you have to go to phone here and then tap camera. And then this is, if I bring the phone up here, you can see that, it's the camera. So I can take a snapshot here. And you can't really do anything with it. You can't save it anywhere. It just saves it temporarily, and then when you hit main menu, it just goes back to the main menu. I can go back in here. We can take another snapshot, and if I move the phone, you can see it's not going to move because a snapshot has been taken. We'll go back to the main menu. Also in phone, you've got voicemail, which if you had any voicemails, presumably it would do something. In this case, it just jumps you back to the main interface here. That might be a bug, actually. It might be because we don't have the voicemail component, which this is not like a complete package. I should say that there are some components missing that I don't believe have ever been leaked to the public. But yeah, so that's what voicemail does on this build that I've got here on this.
Okay, so this is an early iPhone prototype. Dude, what's up with my chat? Says that the chat is successfully connected.
Configuration. You also have audio preferences. This is where you can choose where you want the phone to output audio to, so you can do receiver, headphone, speaker, or even Bluetooth. Yes, they did have Bluetooth working, which is pretty cool. And you can select the volume here, presumably at least, and your ringtone. And these are the same ringtones, at least as far as I can tell, that were shipped on the iPhone when it launched. So you got all sorts of ones here. We can go down to the bottom of the list here and get, can you scroll? Is that? No, that's, you just have to use.
Are they still talking about
Did you fall over, you drunk? Be patient, chat.
This is extremely
This is
boring.
the worst night. Listen, we get to the IP, you still gotta do cooking with Warski.
Dude, the guy is a heavy drinker. Holy shit, dude, they're both...
I don't know, they are kind of playing up. I'm starting to lean towards two boys. I'm starting to lean towards...
Yeah, so basically, they're just heavy drinkers. I'm not interested in watching this. Euros is probably drunk as fuck listening to PPP also. It's not interesting, dude. Nicolas Cage, the god of acting. What is this? This is like some Hindu movie. I'm not too interested in that. We Are Venom ending scene. I can't actually play it because I'll get a copyright strike if I do.
Just got to use the side here. I was saying there's no way they had like the rubber banding on here. I'm thinking that the scroll bar is the gray part, but it's actually the red part. So we'll say xylophone maybe. We'll select that, and again, we don't get any output. No matter what we select here, I can select receiver, and it doesn't do anything, though it might not be configured to actually play the sound when you tap on it like it is in Springboard. But yeah, that is audio preferences. Next up is call preferences, where you can do things that you've never been able to do on retail iPhone software. You can choose to answer calls automatically, ignore calls automatically, call repeatedly. That's great. Number of times to send, seconds before hang up, seconds before next send. And you've also got your monitor over here. You can tap on that and you can see it just shows nothing, but if it had anything to show, it would be. And if you go back, you can see you get to this interface here. We'll come back to this because there is a way to get into this from the main menu here. So that is pretty much everything in phone. So next up is SMS. Now, you've got some test messages here, 1 through 5. Again, we don't have any connection to the cellular network, so we're not going to be able to do anything with it. You can compose a message here. That's not compose a message, that's that is view messages. Compose a message will...
Okay, I like some of these videos from Asianometry. Why the 157 nm lithography failed.
For a long time, the semiconductor industry's primary economic engine was Moore's Law, an internal benchmark of doubling the number of devices on an integrated chip every 18 months. Broadly speaking, 3 engines drove these advances: semiconductor design, increasing wafer sizes, and lastly, lithography. Improvements in optical lithography techniques have been the true driving force behind producing faster and faster chips. But coming up to the new millennium, it became clear to everyone that the lithographic train of progress was breaking to a slow halt. Was there enough left in the tank for one last ride? In this video, we look back at what would have been the last optical lithography technology and why the industry failed to sign on. In the 2 decades since 1980, semiconductor lithography tools had the benefit of using wavelengths smaller than, or at least equal to, the minimum feature size of their process nodes. For instance, in 1980, the industry used G-line mercury arc lamps. These had a 435 nanometer wavelength. The leading process node at the time was the 1.5 micrometer process, corresponding to a 1500 nanometer half pitch. 1500 nanometers versus 435 nanometers. In that situation, it's like drawing thick lines with a sharp pencil. So much easier. Then, in the second half of the 1980s, the industry moved to the I-line at 365 nanometers. Again, not a problem since the leading edge process node at the time was 800 nanometers. But the pace of Moore's Law was starting to catch up on the industry. In the late 1990s, the industry switched from using lamps to excimer lasers. In 1999, the year of the Dreamcast, the industry started using 248 nanometer KrF lasers for their leading edge process node at the time, 180 nanometers. 193 nanometer ARF lithography was scheduled to come online 2 years later in 2001. But by now, Moore's Law was flying like the Millennium Falcon. In just 13 years, from 1987 to 1999, the industry's leading edge process node went from 800 nanometers to 180 nanometers. From the early 1980s, the minimum feature size on an integrated chip had basically shrank about 100 times. Then, in 1999, it became the case that the leading edge process node had a minimum feature size smaller than the most advanced lithographic wavelength. And from then on, it became much harder to push the limit on semiconductor manufacturing. At around then, the semiconductor industry was putting the finishing touches on 193 nanometer ARF laser technology, scheduled for a full launch at around 2001. But with how fast Moore's Law was compounding now, analysts predicted that the 193 nanometer lasers would be unsuitable for the 100 to 70 nanometer process nodes. Those nodes needed to come out around 2003, less than 2 years after the laser's rollout. But that was alright because help was on the way, right? By then, the industry had agreed that extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV, was their long-term future. The foundries wanted EUV equipment in their clean rooms for the 100 nanometer process node, just in time to replace those 193 nanometer lasers. Unfortunately, it became clear that EUV was not ready. It was a completely new technology that used mirrors instead of lenses. The EUV light source was woefully underpowered, the mirrors weren't flat enough, and there were serious defect issues. Analysts predicted that EUV wouldn't be ready until at least 2010. In actuality, it was far longer than that. So what can foundries use between 193 nanometers and EUV? That is how the idea of 157 nanometers came about. 157 was meant to be a bridge from 193 to EUV, especially during the 100 to 70 nanometer nodes, which EUV should have been available for. The difference between 193 and 157 nanometers was just 36 nanometers, but this 20% reduction represents a bigger scaling down than from 436 to 365. Furthermore, 157 nanometer lithography would use a fluorine excimer laser, and thus was presumed to be similar to the 248 and 193 nanometer lithography processes. Presumably, this would smooth out the transition since relatively little would change. Considering the daunting challenges up ahead in future nodes, some advocated for rushing.
That is very interesting about that 193 nanometer laser technology. But they had to wait like from 2001 to 2010 to develop that.
This technology into clean rooms to help keep Moore's Law alive. 157 equipment would hit clean rooms in 2003, just in time for the 100 nanometer process node. But such transitions are never so easy to pull off. I want to pause here to briefly discuss with you optical lithography technology, the magical light train that took us so far. Over the span of 30 years. First, the lithography part, and then the optical. Lithography is a process involving 3 system parts: the exposure tool, the mask, and the resist. First, you coat a wafer in a photosensitive chemical called a resist or a photoresist. Then you take a master image printed on what is called a mask and send high-powered light through that mask onto that wafer. The system that does this is called the exposure tool, and inside that would be your excimer laser, crazy multi-lens optical system, and so on. The resist reacts to the light so that the chip pattern gets printed onto the wafer. After that, the pattern can then be used as a stencil for further etching processes. That's lithography in a nutshell. So why am I calling it optical lithography, and does it matter? Optical lithography is different from a...
I don't know what's going on, but my streaming thing is kind of glitching out. Sorry, wrong chat. I don't know why Euros is so uptight about shit, bro. But whatever. Did you mix me up with the Kino Corner, Brucey?
Its next generation counterparts. It has 3 differentiating components. First, it uses photons. Second, its masks are transmissive photomasks, meaning that they are transparent. Third, they employ projection optics to shrink an image. The pattern on the mask is often 4 to 5 times larger than what you want to put onto the chip. This is a helpful benefit that makes the masks easier to create. Development began in 1997 with a microstepper prototype at the MIT Lincoln Laboratory. It was far smaller than a commercial system, but it was capable of patterning 80 nanometer wide lines, more than sufficient for the 100 nanometer node. As I mentioned, a lithography system's critical elements are the exposure tool, mask, and the resist. All three would need extensive re-engineering for 157. Let us start with the exposure tool, which contains the laser and the optic system. Because ordinary air easily absorbs 157 nanometer light, the entire light pathway has to be purged of air and replaced with inert nitrogen. This added substantial...
Dude, how in the world do they do that? Man, like, how in the hell do they actually do that? Yeah, I have both open. I posted a Ralph quote, LOL. Ralph quote. Hey, I like Ethan Ralph, bro. I sort of like him, bro, even though, like, I don't know, man. Ralph is fine. Ralph is okay, bro.
Substantial cost to the whole system. For the laser, industry analysts early on worried whether the 157.63 nanometer fluorine gas excimer laser could output enough power as its 248 and 193 generation peers. Surprisingly though, laser suppliers quickly caught up and started producing lasers with 10 and even 20 watts of power. They were ahead of expectations, so this was essentially considered on track. But there was one serious problem with the laser. The width of its lines were too wide. Usually, this is not a major problem. You can correct it at the optic system level with different glass materials and leveraging how they disperse light just like a pair of glasses. Unfortunately, 157 nanometer light is so easily absorbed that the optic systems designers, again our friends at Carl Zeiss, only had one option for the lens material in the whole system: crystalline calcium fluoride. Specialty glass companies like Corning and Schott started working on producing enough of this crystal at extremely high purities, and the struggle was real. Furthermore, they have to grow it in such a way to minimize what is called stress-induced birefringence. Birefringence is a fancy word that describes how light splits into two when it enters a crystal. This would scatter 157 nanometer light and reduce its contrast, resulting in image aberrations. Image aberrations are not acceptable in semiconductor manufacturing. When the crystal is deformed due to weaknesses in production, unwanted birefringence occurs. The glass companies overcame this, but in 2001, a few years into test production, they realized that the crystal inherently produced some amount of birefringence no matter how unstressed and chilled out it was. This intrinsic birefringence, as it was called, was measured at just 11.2 nanometers for each centimeter of crystal, but nevertheless was a serious issue. Zeiss and ASML engineers played with the idea of introducing a second lens material into the optic system. Barium fluoride crystals, which occurs in nature as the amusingly named Frank Dixonite, have a similar intrinsic birefringence, but in the opposite direction. However, the supply chain was not prepared to ramp up on this new material. They were having enough headaches with calcium fluoride alone, so the idea was dropped. Eventually, the engineers discovered that the amount of intrinsic birefringence depended on the direction at which the light enters the crystal. So, they created crystal orientation pairs that cancel out each other's light distortions. For instance, one crystal lens positioned in a specific orientation, which ASML labeled as 111, needs to be paired with two 100 orientation crystal lenses. The second brother of those two 100 lenses has to be tilted 45 degrees in relation to the first. This pairing requirement had knock-on effects throughout the rest of the system, for instance in the optical lens coatings and notably in the machine's embedded software, which needed rewrites. But this crazy intrinsic birefringence compensation scheme worked. Zeiss himself would be proud. You might be wondering why the lithography industry chose this specific wavelength, 157 nanometers. The number is very significant. 193 nanometers might have been the last optical lithography technology put into mass production, but 157 is the last feasible optical lithography technology, period. And that is because of the photomask. The mask is the semi-transparent template that holds the chip design. For decades, the industry made their masks out of fused silica, pure silicon dioxide glass. The industry preferred fused silica for this because it handles big temperature changes very well. If the temperature moves by 1 degree Celsius, the glass's structure will only shift by about 0.00005%. So, if the chip pattern sitting on this fused silica plate is made up of lines about 50 millimeters wide, remember the mask's features will shrink so it doesn't have to be as small as what's on the chip, then 1 degree Celsius of variation will cause it to distort by only about 25 nanometers. Acceptable. 157 nanometers is the last wavelength for which fused silica remains transparent, and as it turns out, even the normal version absorbs 157 nanometer light. ASML and Corning had to develop what is called a dehydrated fused silica that allowed just 85% of the UV light to pass through. Using other materials to make the mask, like the crystalline calcium fluoride used for the optical lenses, was not viable because those materials would greatly warp and distort during the wafer exposure stage. So, the dehydrated fused silica invention was a critical breakthrough, allowing 157 masks to move forward. By 2002, ASML was still figuring out how to produce a suitable pellicle, which is kind of like a protective sheath, to protect the mask from contaminants, but the component looked on track for mass production. If you recall, the resist is meant to help hold the chip pattern onto the wafer by absorbing UV light from the mask. The biggest challenges here were chemical ones. Conventional resist used for 248 and 193 were basically modified hydrocarbons, but hydrocarbons at their conventional thicknesses absorbed too much 157 nanometer light. So you either made the resist layer thinner, about 60 or 90 nanometers, which had accuracy consequences, or find something else. Some of these newer materials were very exotic and were synthesized from known carcinogens. But more importantly, it seemed unlikely that the industry would be able to formulate and commercialize a proper resist alternative in time for the 90/100 nanometer process node generation. They would just have to make the resist thinner. And that was where progress was when 157 ended. The teams developing 157 nanometer lithography managed to overcome many of these daunting technical challenges. In the end, however, they failed a more fundamental challenge. In the early 2000s, 193 nanometer immersion, or 193i technology, rapidly emerged as a legitimate next-generation candidate to succeed 193. Immersion lithography involves sending UV rays through an immersion fluid in order to improve the machine's printing resolution. The industry suddenly found itself trying to support 3 viable next-generation lithography technologies, 193i, 157, and EUV. There were too many options. Semitech.
Oh, have any of you guys heard about the new Buzz Lightyear movie that's coming out? Watching this muted RN. Hey, what's up, Beans? Forge gang! Do you still want to teach me how to use the drumming machine, bro? I'm sorry that I didn't get back to you on that, man. I still do want to help you with setting up that music software. I gotta clear out some of my desktop volume. If I could ever get this to work, bro. If I could get this Windows 10 software to work, this would be perfect for the drumming software that you want me to download and pre-install. Or download and automatically auto-install. But I have been extremely busy. Hopefully I will have time Wednesday. Peace out. V7. Yeah, today is Monday, August the 15th. But yeah, I'll see you around, Beans.
North America Semiconductor Industry Collective called in the leading representatives for each of the 3 technologies to defend their approach in a Shark Tank-style bake-off. 157 emerged as the weakest link. It was conservative, but not as conservative as 193i, which didn't require as much new technology. And crucially, a commercially suitable 157 immersion fluid had not yet been found. while for 193i, you can use simple ultra-pure water. And while 157nm technology was coming along, it was not coming along fast enough to roll out by the 100nm process node. Crucially, yields on acceptable amounts of crystal calcium fluoride for the lens were still in the 1% range. And finally, there was the cost factor. Lithography machines represent over half of the total capital costs of a fab. 157nm machines were estimated to cost twice as much as their 193nm counterparts, a really hard pill to swallow. In May 2003, Intel, one of the technology's original champions, announced that they were dropping 157 out of their roadmap. They cited technical factors for their decision, not economic ones. The industry lurched on a little bit longer after that massive blow. They still held the 4th annual International Symposium on 157nm lithography in Yokohama that August, for instance, and ASML shipped their prototype Microscan 7 to their test customer and frequent collaborator IMEC in September 2003. But within a year of Intel's big announcement, the other semiconductor manufacturers also halted their development on 157 technologies. Suppliers of lithography tools, optical materials, photoresists, anti-reflection coatings, pellicles, masks, mask blanks, metrology tools, and inspection tools. Those guys had collectively invested hundreds of millions of dollars into developing 157nm lithography technologies, now flushed down the toilet. The industry pivoted to 193i in the short term and EUV in the long term. ASML released its first immersion lithography TwinScan in 2006. Optical lithography gave the semiconductor industry its golden years, and the industry tried to give the technology its one last ride with 157nm. But in the end, the train had reached its final destination, and it was time to move on. The lithography industry would from then on focus solely on bringing EUV to market, and the foundries would try to tread water until it arrived. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Subscribe to the...
Alright, you folks ready to go see something cool?
I have talked a lot about chip manufacture and how processors are made and things like that, but I've never actually gone and seen it. So after bugging Intel for months, they have invited me out here to their main manufacturing and research center outside of Portland, Oregon. And we are here to see not only how this stuff is made, but really to see the cutting edge next generation of processor manufacture. And this is going to affect everything from high-end computing all the way on down to your phones to the tiny chips in appliances and connected devices. And this stuff is wild. It is seriously space-age technology. So let's go check it out. This place is huge. It is like 4 of the biggest buildings you have ever seen in a giant campus out here in the suburbs. What we're talking about here is EUV, or Extreme Ultraviolet Lithography. Hi, this is me back at the desk. So, what is EUV? This is the next generation of manufacturing for processors and really any integrated circuits, and it is a giant leap forward. The tools that chip makers have been using for more than a decade have been redesigned from scratch, all in the quest for faster chips that use less power. Oh, and if you are just tuning in, this is Upscaled, our explainer show, and today we are explaining EUV. Cue the logo. EUV is a big deal because it's going to enable even smaller transistors. Now, we've covered this in previous episodes, but for a quick refreshing onto a screen, lenses shrink down the image of the mask and focus it onto the wafer. Now, it is a little more complicated than that. There are these chemical resists on the silicon that harden or soften only where light is projected, and then acids etch away the unexposed spaces, and Also, these days the whole thing happens underwater, but essentially do this process enough times and you get a processor. I went to Intel to see their work on the next generation of this manufacturing process, EUV, which scientists have been working on for more than 20 years. Now, the factory where chips are made is called a fab, and the whole place is a level 10 clean room, which means there are less than 10 particles of dust per cubic foot inside. All right, we are hairnetted and masked up here and ready to go. And we need to get a full body clean suit on here, so no dust entering. As pristine as we can be. This is a heck of a facility. We're gonna get prepared and head on into the fab. We even had to wipe down all of my camera gear to get any dust off before we were able to go inside. The first thing you'll probably notice is the light. Fabs are lit with yellow light because it's a relatively long wavelength. The resists, those chemical layers they use when making the chips, are mostly sensitive to short wavelengths, like blue or UV light, so the yellow light ensures the chips don't get prematurely exposed. All right, so we have gotten fully clean room suited up, and we are here actually in the fab. And in this room, what we have here is actually one of the EUV reticles. This is essentially the mask. This is what has the blueprint for the chip on it. You can see that really fine diffraction pattern from the incredibly fine features and details that this has etched into it. Now, this is just a test one. The actual reticles are so sensitive to dust and contamination that even suited up, it's still not actually safe to take them out. They spend pretty much their entire lives in these protective cases, but we're getting a chance to see with this sample one what they actually look like outside of the case. So remember, the mask is like a large-scale blueprint of the chip. And if normal lithography uses the mask and ultraviolet light kind of like a projector, EUV is a little different. Normal lithography uses ultraviolet light with a wavelength of 193 nanometers, but EUV uses light at 13.5 nanometers, hence extreme ultraviolet. At that tiny wavelength, the light is absorbed by almost everything, including glass lenses, the transparent quartz that normal masks are made of, and even air. So instead of transmitting light through a mask, EUV masks are reflective and use mirrors to bounce the light onto the silicon wafer. Oh, and all of this has to happen in a vacuum. The 193 nanometer UV light used in the normal fab comes from an argon fluoride laser, but to generate that 13.5 nanometer light, lasers aren't good enough anymore. So behind me here, these are Intel's more advanced current EUV tools that they are developing this new process on. So you can see these are absolutely enormous. There's 3 of them in giant racks right here and space for more behind them. Now, one of the challenges here, these are massive and they operate under vacuum.
Ultraviolet lithography works.
Many inventions have taken several centuries to develop into their modern forms, and modern inventions are rarely the product of a single inventor's efforts. The computer is no different. The bits and pieces of the computer, both hardware and software, have come together over many centuries, with many people and groups each adding a small contribution. We start as early as 3000 BC with the Chinese abacus. How is this related to computing, you ask? The abacus was one of the first machines humans had ever created to be used for counting and calculating. Fast forward to 1642, and the abacus evolves into the first mechanical adding machine, built by mathematician and scientist Blaise Pascal. This first mechanical calculator, the Pascaline, is also where we see the first signs of technophobia emerging, with mathematicians fearing the loss of their jobs due to progress. Also in the 1600s, from the 1660s to the early 1700s, we meet Gottfried Leibniz, a pioneer in many fields, most notably known for his contributions to mathematics and considered by many the first computer scientist. Inspired by Pascal, he created his own calculating machine, able to perform all 4 arithmetic operations. He was also the first to lay down the concepts of binary arithmetic, how all technology nowadays communicates, and even envisioned a machine that used binary arithmetic. From birth, we are taught how to do arithmetic in base 10, and for most people that's all they are concerned with, the numbers 0 to 9. However, there are an infinite number of ways to represent information, such as octal as base 8, hexadecimal as base 16 used to represent colors, base 256 which is used for encoding, the list can go on. Binary is base 2, represented by the numbers 0 and 1. We'll explore later in this video why binary is essential for modern computing. Back on topic, progressing to the 1800s, we are met with Charles Babbage. Babbage is known as the father of the computer, with the design of his mechanical calculating engines. In 1820, Babbage noticed that many computations consisted of operations that were regularly repeated, and theorized that these operations could be done automatically. This led to his first design, the difference engine. It would have a fixed instruction set, be fully automatic through the use of steam power, and print its results into a table. In 1830, Babbage stopped work on his difference engine to pursue his second idea, the analytical engine. Elaborating on the difference engine, this machine would be able to execute operations in non-numeric orders through the addition of conditional control, store memory, and read instructions from punch cards, essentially making it a programmable mechanical computer. Unfortunately, due to lack of funding, his designs never came to reality, but if they had, would have sped up the invention of the computer by nearly 100 years. Also worth mentioning is Ada Lovelace, who worked very closely with Babbage. She is considered the world's first programmer and came up with an algorithm that would calculate Bernoulli numbers that was designed to work with Babbage's machine. She also outlined many fundamentals of programming such as data analysis, looping, and memory addressing. 10 years prior to the turn of the century, with inspiration from Babbage, American inventor Herman Hollerith designed one of the first successful electromechanical machines, referred to as a census tabulator. This machine would read US census data from punch cards, up to 65 at a time, and tally up the results. Hollerith's tabulator became so successful, he went on to found his own firm to market the device. This company eventually became IBM. To briefly explain how punch cards work, essentially once fed into a machine, an electrical connection is attempted to be made. Depending on where the holes in the card are, will determine your input based on what connections are completed. To input data to the punch card, you could use a key punch machine, aka the first iteration of a keyboard. The 1800s are a period where the theory of computing began to evolve, and machines started to be used for calculations. But the 1900s is where we begin to see the pieces of this nearly 5,000-year puzzle coming together, especially between 1930 to 1950. In 1936, Alan Turing proposed a concept of a universal machine, later to be dubbed the Turing machine, capable of computing anything that is computable. Up to this point, machines were not only able to do certain tasks that the hardware was designed for. The concept of the modern computer is largely based off Turing's ideas. Also starting in 1936, German engineer Konrad Zuse invented the world's first programmable computer. This device read instructions from punched tape and was the first computer to use Boolean logic and binary to make decisions through the use of relays. For reference, Boolean logic is simply logic that results in either a true or false output, or when corresponding to binary, 1 or 0. We'll be diving into Boolean logic deeper later in this video. Zuse would later use punch cards to encode information in binary, essentially making them the first data storage and memory devices. In 1942, with the computer the Z4, Zuse also released the world's first commercial computer. For these reasons, many consider Zuse the inventor of the modern-day computer. In 1937, Howard Aiken with his colleagues at Harvard and in collaboration with IBM began work on the Harvard Mark I calculating machine, a programmable calculator and inspired by Babbage's analytical engine. This machine was composed of nearly 1 million parts, had over 500 miles of wiring, and weighed nearly 5 tons. The Mark I had 60 sets of 24 switches for manual data entry and could store 72 numbers, each 23 decimal digits long. It could do 3 additions or subtractions in a second, a multiplication took 6 seconds, a division took 15.3 seconds, and a logarithm or trig function took about 1 minute. As a funny side note, one of the primary programmers of the Mark I, Grace Hopper, discovered the first computer bug, a dead moth blocking one of the reading holes of the machine. Hopper is also credited with coining the word debugging. The vacuum tube era marks the beginning of modern computing, the first technology that was fully digital, and unlike the relays used in previous computers, were less power hungry, faster, and more reliable. Beginning in 1937 and completing in 1942, the first digital computer was built by John Atanasoff and his graduate student Clifford Berry. The computer was dubbed the ABC. Unlike previously built computers like those built by Zuse, the ABC was purely digital. It used vacuum tubes and included binary math and Boolean logic to solve up to 29 equations at a time. In 1943, the Colossus was built in collaboration with Alan Turing to assist in breaking German crypto codes, not to be confused with Turing's Bombay that actually solved Enigma. This computer was fully digital as well, but unlike the ABC, was fully programmable, making it the first fully programmable digital computer. Completing construction in 1946, the Electrical Numerical Integrator and Computer, aka the ENIAC, was completed. Composed of nearly 18,000 vacuum tubes and large enough to fill an entire room, the ENIAC is considered the first successful high-speed electronic digital computer. It was somewhat programmable, but like Aiken's Mark I, was a pain to rewire every time the instruction set had to be changed. The ENIAC essentially took the concepts from Metanesoft's ABC and elaborated on them in a much larger scale. Meanwhile, the ENIAC was under construction in 1945. Mathematician John von Neumann contributed a new understanding of how computers should be organized and built, further elaborating on Turing's theories and bringing clarity to the idea of computer memory and addressing. He elaborated on conditional addressing or subroutines, something Babbage had envisioned for his analytical engine nearly 100 years earlier. Also, the idea that instructions or the program running on a computer could be modified in the same way as data, and decode them in binary. Von Neumann assisted in the design of the ENIAC successor, the Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer, aka the EDVAC, which was completed in 1950 and the first stored program computer. It was able to operate over 1,000 instructions per second. He is also credited with being the father of computer virology, with his design of a self-reproducing computer program.
And it contains essentially those things which the modern computer has in it, although in somewhat primitive form. This machine has stored program concept as its major feature, and that, in fact, is the thing which makes the modern computer revolution possible.
At this point, you can see that computing had officially evolved into its own field, from mechanical to electromechanical relays that took milliseconds, to digital vacuum tubes that took only microseconds. From binary as a way to encode information with punch cards, to being used with Boolean logic and represented by physical technologies like relays and vacuum tubes, to finally being used to store instructions and programs. From the abacus as a way to count, to Pascal's mechanical calculator, the theories of Leibniz, Alan Turing, and John von Neumann, the vision of Babbage and the intellect of Lovelace, George Boole's contribution of Boolean logic, the progressing inventions of a programmable calculator to a stored program fully digital computer, and countless other inventions, individuals, and groups, each step a further accumulation of knowledge. While the title of the inventor of the computer may be given to an individual or group, it was really a joint contribution over 5,000 years, and more so between 1800 to 1950. Vacuum tubes were a huge improvement over relays, but they still didn't make economic sense in a large scale. For example, of the ENIAC's 18,000 tubes, roughly 50 would burn out per day, and a round-the-clock team of technicians would be needed to replace them. Vacuum tubes were also the reason why computers took up the space of entire rooms, weighed multiple tons, and consumed enough energy to power a small town. In 1947, the first silicon transistor was invented at Bell Labs, and by 1954, the first transistorized digital computer was invented, aka the Trudic. It was composed of 800 transistors, took the space of 0.085 cubic meters compared to the 28 the ENIAC took up, only took 100 watts of power, and could perform 1 million operations per second. Also during this era, we begin to see major introductions on both the hardware and software aspect of computing. On the hardware side, the first memory device, the Random Access Magnetic Core Store, was introduced in 1951 by J. Forrester. In other words, the beginnings of what is now known as RAM today. The first hard drive was introduced by IBM in 1957. It weighed 1 ton and could store 5 megabytes, costing approximately $27,000 per month in today's money. On the software side is where a lot of major innovations and breakthroughs began to come. This because computer hardware and architecture was beginning to become more standardized, instead of everyone working on different variations of a computing machine. Assembly was the first programming language to be introduced in 1949, but really started taking off in this era of computing. Assembly was a way to communicate with the machine in pseudo-English instead of machine language, aka binary. The first true widely used programming language was Fortran, invented by John Baucus at IBM in 1954. Assembly is a low-level language, and Fortran is a high-level language. In low-level languages, while you aren't writing instructions in machine code, a very deep understanding of computer architecture and instructions is still required to execute a desired program, which means a limited number of people have the skills, and it is very error-prone. Also in the early to mid-50s, to compile code back to machine code was still an expensive and time-consuming process. This all changed with Grace Hopper and her development of the first computer compiler. Hopper, if you remember from earlier, also found the first computer bug. This allowed for programming of computers to become more affordable and nearly instantaneous instead of the time-consuming process of writing code in assembly and then manually converting it back to machine code. As a side note, Hopper assisted with the invention of another early programming language, COBOL. This era marks the beginnings of the modern computing era, and where the exponential trend of computing performance really began. While transistors were a major improvement over vacuum tubes, they still had to be individually soldered together. As a result, the more complex computers became, led to more complicated and numerous connections between transistors, increasing the likelihood of faulty wiring. In 1958, this all changed with Jack Kilby of Texas Instruments and his invention of the integrated circuit. The integrated circuit was a way to pack many transistors onto a single chip instead of individually wiring transistors. Packing all the transistors also significantly reduced the power and heat consumption of computers once again, and made them significantly more economically feasible to design and buy. Integrated circuits sparked a hardware revolution, and beyond computers assisted in the development of various other electronic devices due to miniaturization, such as the mouse invented by Douglas Engelbart in 1964. He also demonstrated the first graphical user interface. As a side note, computer speed, performance, memory, and storage also began to iteratively increase as ICs could pack more transistors into smaller surface areas. This demonstrated by the invention of the floppy disk in 1971 by IBM, and in the same year DRAM by Intel, to list a few. Along with hardware, further advances in software were made as well, with an explosion of programming languages and the introduction of some of the most common languages today, BASIC in 1964 and C in 1971. As you can see from throughout this video, computing since the 1900s has evolved at an increasingly fast rate. Thus, in 1965, led Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, to make one of the greatest predictions in human history. Computing power would double every 2 months at low cost, and that computers would eventually be so small that they could be embedded into homes, cars, and what he referred to as personal portable communications equipment, aka mobile phones. We now refer to this as Moore's Law. Here are some charts to further illustrate how fast computing was evolving and what Moore based his predictions on.
One of my colleagues called this Moore's Law. Rather than just being something that chronicles the progress of the industry, it kind of became something that drove the progress of the industry. A tremendous amount of engineering and commitment has been required to make that happen, but much to my surprise, the industry has been able to keep up with the projection.
At this point, the video has come to a conclusion. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up, and if you want me to elaborate on any of the topics discussed or have any topic suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Consider subscribing to my channel for more content, follow my Medium publication.
Google's chip designing artificial intelligence.
Machine learning has been in the news a lot lately. Some of the early hype has died down, but the trend still lives on, and now it has really started to make waves in the chip design world. Machine learning and AI in chip design is such a sprawling field that I started to lose myself in all the research.
Oh, dude, is my stream still freaking glitching out? Yeah, it is. Yeah, I apologize to whoever's still watching this, probably Brucey. This is like 2.5 hours long. That's just way too long to learn about the origins of artificial intelligence.
History of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not a new word, and not a new technology for researchers. This technology is much older than you would imagine. Even there are the myths of mechanical men in ancient Greek and Egyptian myths. Following are some milestones in the history of AI, which defines the journey from the AI generation to till-date development. Maturation of artificial intelligence, 1943 to 1952. Year 1943, the first work which is now recognized as AI, was done by Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts in 1943. They proposed a model. Artificial intelligence is not a new word, and not a...
Oh, could somebody shove a chicken wing down my throat? I'm starving. I don't have enough energy to raise that sword up and chop off the head in the name of...
New technology for researchers. This technology is much older than you would imagine. Even there are the myths of mechanical men in ancient Greek and Egyptian myths. Following are some milestones in the history of AI, which defines the journey from the AI generation to till-date development. Maturation of artificial intelligence, 1943 to 1952. Year 1943. The first work which is now recognized as AI was done by Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts in 1943. They proposed a model of artificial neurons. Year 1949. Donald Hebb demonstrated an updating rule for modifying the connection strength between neurons. His rule is now called Hebbian learning. Year 1950. The Alan Turing, who was an English mathematician and pioneered machine learning in 1950. Alan Turing publishes Computing Machinery and Intelligence, in which he proposed a test. The test can check the machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to human intelligence, called the Turing test. The birth of artificial intelligence, 1952 to 1956. Year 1955, and Alan Newell and Herbert A. Simon created the first artificial intelligence program, which was named as Logic Theorist. This program had proved 38 of 52 mathematics theorems, and find new and more elegant proofs for some theorems. Year 1956. The word artificial intelligence first adopted by American computer scientist John McCarthy at the Dartmouth Conference. For the first time, AI coined as an academic field. At that time, high-level computer languages such as Fortran, Lisp, or COBOL were invented. And the enthusiasm for AI was very high at that time.
Do they have to put in that annoying musical score? Like, get rid of that music. It's annoying.
The Golden Years early enthusiasm, 1956 to 1974. Year 1966. The researchers emphasized developing algorithms which can solve mathematical problems. Joseph Weizenbaum created the first chatbot in 1966, which was named as Eliza. Year 1972. The first intelligent humanoid robot was built in Japan, which was named as Wobbit-1. The first AI winter, 1974 to 1980. The duration between years 1974 to 1980 was the first AI winter duration. AI winter refers to the time period where computer scientists dealt with a severe shortage of funding from government for AI researches. During AI winters, an interest of publicity on artificial intelligence was decreased. A boom of AI, 1980 to 1987. Year 1980, after AI winter duration, AI came back with Expert System. Expert systems were programmed that emulate the decision-making ability of a human expert. In the year 1980, the first national conference of the American Association of Artificial Intelligence was held at Stanford University. The second AI winter, 1987 to 1993. The duration between the years 1987 to 1993 was the second AI winter duration. Again, investors and government stopped in funding for AI research, as due to high cost but not efficient result. The expert system such as XCON was very cost-effective. The emergence of intelligent agents, 1993 to 2011. Year 1997, IBM Deep Blue beats world chess champion Garry Kasparov and became the first computer to beat a world chess champion. Year 2002, for the first time, AI entered the home in the form of Roomba, a vacuum cleaner. Year 2006, AI came in the business world till the year 2006. Companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Netflix also started using AI. Deep learning, big data, and artificial general intelligence, 2011 to present day. In the year 2011, IBM's Watson won Jeopardy! A quiz show where it had to solve the complex questions as well as riddles. Watson had proved that it could understand natural language and can solve tricky questions quickly. Year 2012, Google has launched an Android app feature Google Now, which was able to provide information to the user as a prediction. Year 2014, chatbot Eugene Gustman won a competition in the infamous Turing test. Year 2018, the project debater from IBM debated on complex topics with 2 master debaters and also performed extremely well. Google has demonstrated an AI program Duplex, which was a virtual assistant and which had taken hairdresser appointment on call, and lady on other side didn't notice that she was talking with the machine. Now AI has developed to a remarkable level. The concept of deep learning, big data, and data science are now trending like a boom. Nowadays companies like Google, Facebook, IBM, and Amazon are working with AI and creating amazing devices. The future of artificial intelligence.
That was really interesting.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into Futurology, an Earth One subsidiary. This video is a compilation of some of the best documentaries on AI, and is an introductory video.
In 1986, the Soviet Union had slightly more than 10,000 computers. The Americans had 1.3 million. At the time of Stalin's death, the Soviet Union was the world's third most proficient computing power. But by the 1960s, the US-Soviet computing gap was already years long. 20 years later, the gap was undeniable and basically permanent. Why did this happen? The Soviet state believed in science and industrial modernization. Support for research and development and the hard sciences were plentiful. They had the country's finest minds. Goodness gracious, they launched Sputnik. They landed on Venus. How did it come to this? In 1948, news arrived in the Soviet Union about the ENIAC, the first general-purpose programmable computer, having been built 2 years earlier in the United States. The Soviets knew little about how the ENIAC worked, other than that it used vacuum tubes, and many dismissed the news as simply propaganda. But they could not help but notice that the West was putting a lot of resources into space. The Soviet government did need to improve its calculating workflows. For instance, the nuclear weapons effort required 100+ young calculator girls working daily 8-hour shifts doing nothing but calculations. Administrators were concerned about finding enough people to do error-free calculations of things like differential equations. Differential equations are, haha, just kidding guys, no math here. I still wake up at 3 a.m. from calculus nightmares. Anyway, in 1948, the Soviet Union set up a new institute within the Soviet Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Precision Mechanics and Computer Technology, or ITM-VT, to explore this. However, the ITM-VT's first efforts were towards mechanical analog calculating machines. This was due to the political influence of its director, the powerful General Nikolai Burevich, who thoroughly believed that reliable electronic general computers in the near future were impossible. A number of Soviet scientists believed this direction to be wrong. In the Stalin era, however, voicing such concerns and going against the party directive was dangerous, to say the least. But over in Ukraine, a new development gave them the headroom to try. In 1948, Sergei Lebedev, the director of the Kiev Electrotechnical Institute in Ukraine, learned about the American efforts to build digital computers. Lebedev was a trained electrical engineer and war hero. During World War II, he developed a tank gun stabilization system that allowed tanks to aim and fire properly at the enemy whilst on the move. This won him a medal and the Order of the Red Banner of Labor. Realizing the computer's importance to his country, over the next 2 years, Lebedev built his own quote-unquote little calculating machine, the Mali Elektrono-Shenaya Mashina, or MESM, ironically named since it had about 6,000 vacuum tubes and took up 60 square meters of space. On December 1951, MESM solved its first real calculation, solving for 585 possible values of a probability distribution function for an artillery weapons calculation table. This required 250,000 calculations in 2.5 hours. In late 1949, the device was shown to a group of top political leaders, including future Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, at the time secretary of the Ukrainian Communist Party. It apparently impressed him. The renegade scientists at the ITMVT reached out to Khrushchev, who gave the go-ahead to depose the once powerful Nikolai Borevich and allow the ITMVT to move forward with a new, more powerful digital computer. The Bolshaya Elektronia Shanaya Mashina, or BESM-1, the name literally means large calculating machine, and it was capable of 8,000 to 10,000 operations each second, or 8 to 10 kiloflops. The BESM-1 would have been one of the world's fastest computers, certainly the fastest in Europe. To compare, in 1951, the UNIVAC-1 was one of America's leading-edge computing machines, and it was capable of only about 1 kiloflop. But ITMVT struggled to deliver the BESM. That's because the Ministry of Machine and Instrument Engineering had previously started a new institute called SKB-245 for making differential analyzers. These are mechanical analog computers that use wheels and disks to solve differential equations. They were quite popular in America during the 30s and 40s. However, SKB-245 soon went against this mandate and proposed to build their own digital high-speed computer, the Strela. Strela was computationally inferior to the BESM-1, just 2 kiloflops where the BESM did 8 to 10. But its supporters argued that 10 kiloflops was thoroughly unnecessary, when the Strela could perform in 10 hours what would take a single mathematician 100,000 days. A bizarre argument. It reminds me of the 28-nanometer chips are just fine credo. With Stalin's blessing, the two institutes competed, which hurt the BESM. Near the end of its development, the ITMVT needed a special part to bring their machine up to spec, cathode ray tubes for memory storage. However, only one ministry in the country made such things, and unfortunately, that was the Ministry of Machine and Instrument Engineering, SKB-245's ministry. They refused to supply tubes for the BESM-1, forcing the team to adopt mercury storage tubes, an inferior part. A 1951 state commission eventually chose the Strela over BESM-1, perhaps because of its flashy lights. But actual users soon discovered serious issues. First, it broke down too often. And secondly, it could not solve the complicated quadratic equations needed for fission development. This requirement was fairly important. The head of the Soviet nuclear development effort requested BESM replacements. By then, it was 1955. The BESM-1 would remain Europe's fastest computer for a few more years, but the effort illustrates future Soviet issues in building a competitive computer. The Soviets had succeeded in developing a first-generation computer. They did it as fast as the West could, and their computer was arguably better. Another Soviet success, right? Well, no. At the leading edge and on the newspaper headlines, it might seem like the Soviets and the Americans were neck to neck. But at the production level, the story was very different. In 1959, the Soviet Union produced computers worth a cumulative $59 million. Impressive by itself, but that same year the United States produced $1 billion of computer hardware. By 1964, the Soviet Union produced 200 million semiconductor pieces, a great improvement, but still far behind the 1.36 billion that the United States produced that same year. This is where the battle was lost. Far more relevant than any hostile ideology, I have omitted here a long meandering section on Soviet cybernetics. The Soviet computing industry failed because it could not produce enough good computers fast enough. In the Soviet command economy, the computer failed to tap its full potential. The Soviet military had some demand for computers, but only so much. In the West, computer-aided automation revolutionized industrial processes like steelmaking and manufacturing. This drove titanic commercial and industrial demand for computers, far larger than the demand from the military. But the Soviet steelmaker only needs to make enough steel for their quota. Their quota says nothing about how good that steel needed to be, nor how efficient they had to be in making it. Soviet computer makers had little incentive to produce productivity-improving computers. Just as critically, they also had no incentive to provide the necessary training and customer service so that their customers can even properly use their products. As a result, ministers failed to see the computer's full potential, and thus were reluctant to risk their quotas by allocating limited resources to computer development. So factories frequently failed to receive funding, materials, and talents they needed to produce. For instance, in 1958, the Penza Computer and Analytical Machine Plant, one of the only two in the Soviet Union at the time, requested 50 computer experts, but received just 7. This was a systemic problem. The country has long lagged behind its peers when it came to distributing new, revolutionary technologies across the country. For example, the Soviets were pioneers in steelmaking and synthetic fibers. 30 countries, including Japan, purchased the rights to the Soviet steel casting patent. Despite this, the Soviets universally lagged their foreign peers in pushing those innovations across their own economies. In 1959, the West began an industry transition from vacuum tubes to transistors, second-generation computer technology. The transistor's solid-state reliability and smaller size turned the computer from a scientific curiosity into a powerful industrial tool. The IBM 1401, the Model T of computers, sold over 12,000 units as they replaced older punch card technologies. This spurred the development and commercialization of new peripherals, things like cathode ray displays and external storage, as well as new paradigms of programming. The Soviets worked to develop their own second-generation computer, too. While the Ural series of computers, built by the aforementioned Penza computer plant, were notable for their unified nature, the true Soviet second-generation flagship was the Besem 6. The Besem 6 was the Soviet Union's first supercomputer capable of performing over 1 million operations each second. It entered production in 1967 and would be extensively used across the country's computing centers. Besem 6's wide adoption led to the development of new software and multi-program operating systems. Generally, it showed great progress. But by then, the Americans were already moving on to the next big thing. The Soviets managed to deliver a first and second generation computer 2 or so years behind the West. Behind, but not too far behind. But that changed with the third generation computer, devices powered by integrated circuits. The first mentions of a computing gap between the United States and the Soviet Union begin here. In 1964, IBM announced the System 360, a complete line of computer hardware with both backwards and forwards compatibility. Customers who invested in writing expensive software for their second-generation computers can use the System 360 without fear of losing that investment. The 360 revolutionized the computer industry and became one of IBM's greatest commercial successes. Over in the Soviet Union, it became clear that demand for future computers had a seemingly limitless ceiling, and the domestic industry, with its disparate parts, needed to step up. In 1964, the Izvestia, a daily broadsheet and the Soviet Union's newspaper of record, levied the first major criticism of the country's computer efforts. It pointed out that the current industry effort was too disjointed and needed some centralizations. 2 years later, Pravda published an article asking whether the Soviet computer industry was yet ready to meet the national economy's computing requirements. The author writes, "Unfortunately, we must state that the situation is far from optimistic." Now, Russia has been importing foreign technologies going as far back as Peter the Great, and in many cases, this has helped them acquire expertise in disadvantaged industries. For instance, rocketry. Soviet rockets gained much of their early expertise from transferred German scientists and war booty acquired after World War II. Another example would be in the chemical industry. I have also covered other cases of countries importing foreign technologies and successfully improving upon them to dominate the market. China from Germany in the solar panel space, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea from the United States in the early semiconductor space, so on. However, there is always a balance. If the technology transfer process fails to take hold and innovation cannot be self-generated, then what might result is an uncontrollable and irreversible addiction to the imported technology. In 1967, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union followed through and issued a decree, Resolution 1180-420, to consolidate its disparate computing industry. The product would be a series of unified third-generation computers for every problem. The Edinina Sistema Project, or ES, literally meaning unified system. The resolution grew the computing manufacturing budget tenfold to 3 billion rubles in 1975. It directed the country to build 28 new computer plants, expand 22 existing ones, and finally produce 20,000 computers by 1975. To build the ES, the two ministries in charge of development opted to copy an American IBM 360 model's design to make the ES compatible with 360 software. This decision was controversial. Some argued that this would make the USSR an intellectual colony of the West. A few influential scientists felt that this was an opportunity to pioneer a new Soviet computing experience, built from the ground up with modern Soviet standards in mind. One memo read, "Copying foreign work excludes the possibility of utilizing our own collective experience of computer research, and, in the immediate future, will hinder our ability to employ new principles. This will bring the development of computer technology in our nation to an end." This assessment wasn't entirely incorrect. Furthermore, at the time the decision was made, the US government forbade IBM from exporting 360 systems to the Soviet Union. This meant that the Soviets would not have access to adequate documentation and have to acquire genuine systems through espionage or intermediaries. There were other options on the table. ICL, the United Kingdom's biggest computer maker, leapt at the chance to tap the massive Soviet market and overtake their rivals at IBM. In 1968, the computer giant offered to share the technology and documentation from their 360-compatible System 4 line of computers. ICL was even willing to commit significant funds and send specialists for future code development. I mentioned the System 4 in a previous video I made about ICL. ICL had the System 4 because one of its predecessors, English Electric, acquired a license from RCA. This was a promising alternative approach, one where the Soviets can have their 360 software compatibility, learn British programming methods, and also retain some industrial sovereignty. However, working with ICL would also push back the project's delivery date by at least 1.5 years. Such a prospect at the time would be politically difficult to swallow, considering how wide the Soviet-American computer gap already was. This was especially the case in software, with the domestic situation so dire that even Brezhnev knew about it. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union had made this a high political priority, and the penalties for missing those are not pretty. Furthermore, the East German government had already started an effort to study and copy the IBM 360 computer. Telling them to change directions and work with ICL would have had political consequences, i.e., piss them off. This copying decision, documented in meeting notes as it was being made, had tragic, long-lasting consequences on the Soviet computing industry. Several prominent computer scientists resigned their posts in protest. Computer legend Sergei Lebedev attempted to reverse the decision later on, but failed. These efforts are said to have hastened his death in 1974. Over 100 organizations, 46,000 scientists, and 300,000 workers across Poland, East Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Czechoslovakia would help develop the ES. Over 15,000 pieces were created. Many of the ES systems hardware were created through reverse engineering. The peripheral situation, as was often the case in the Soviet computing industry, fell short of Western alternatives. Soviet disk storage solutions were particularly iffy. Software-wise, the ES's 360 compatibility did accelerate Soviet capabilities. Contemporary CIA estimates in the 1970s believe that the Soviet computing gap shrank from the 10 to 15 years it was in the mid-60s to about 4 to 6 years. However, the short-term gain soon led to a long-term loss. Starting in the 1980s, the Soviet industry struggled to reverse engineer increasingly complicated Western computers, widening the gap once more. This time, the Soviets had lost the native industrial capacity to develop anything new on their own. General-purpose computers were ES-1022s, made in 1974, but copying a technology first released in 1965, 24 years old. The linkage to foreign technology also caused issues when the United States and the West levied export bans on their advanced technologies during certain international crises. In the United States, policymakers debated about the merits of allowing the Soviets access to American technologies. Hawks complained that the US was selling them the capability to close their own gap. And in some ways they were right. Looking back at it, with their human capital shortages, the Soviets could never have created anything close to the IBM 360 software. But even with the transfers, the gap still remained, and the Soviets were never able to fully close it. The fall of the Soviet computing industry was a story of wasted talents, lost progress, foolish short-term strategic choices made by politicians over scientists, and the limits of centralized planning. It's a lesson for all to study.
Hey, Rick Perry, what's up, bro? I'm just learning about the history of AI.
History of artificial intelligence.
Computing technology. So, yeah. What's up, Rick Perry? Forge Gang! The rise of AI companions. What in the world is this?
This video is brought to you by Morning Brew. Hi, welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion, where I cover anything in science, technology, business, or history. For over a century, science fiction writers have explored the concept of artificial intelligence. As far back as 1872, an author by the name of Samuel Butler raised questions of conscious machines in his novel, Erewhon. Since then, our imaginations have evolved alongside our technologies to mimic human relationships, is getting close enough to approximating actual relationships, to some degree at least. This is colloquially called an AI companion. Let's explore the idea of AI companions, from its origins in media to the technology that actually exists today. It's an interesting concept, and this episode may make you just think a little bit.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
When the movie Her debuted in 2013, audiences were enamored by a story of a man recovering from heartbreak, finding love once again. But the twist was, this new love was an artificially intelligent operating system. In essence, it wanted audiences to question how they would respond to this future. Again, in 2013, the sci-fi anthology series Black Mirror released an episode titled Be Right Back. It tells the story of Martha, a woman who was devastated by the death of her fiancé in a car accident. Martha signs up for a service that digitally recreates loved ones in the form of AI. It takes its form based on social media communications. Interestingly, in 2021, Microsoft patented technology that would use social media posts to reincarnate people in text form. It would use personal conversations and posts made on social media for training data. It would learn how that person speaks and mimic hypothetical new conversations. The basic idea is that the AI would learn that personality and then clone it. Here's a quote via Forbes from the Microsoft patent. Quote, "The specific person who the chatbot represents may correspond to a past or present entity or version thereof, such as a friend, a relative, an acquaintance, a celebrity, a fictional character, a historical figure, a random entity, etc." In the Black Mirror episode, Martha begins to get frustrated by the small ways that the AI fails to replicate the real thing, and eventually it leads to a tragic end. The beauty of both Black Mirror and Her, much unlike films such as Blade Runner and AI for example, is the setting of a not too distant future. It's so close to reality that it behaves as its own unique uncanny valley, a sort of liminal space and time. In the case of artificially intelligent companions, the future has come to fruition faster than some might have anticipated. This became evident when the world was introduced to Roman Mazurenko, a deceased man that was turned into a chatbot that inspired the now popular Replika app. What's both fascinating and unsettling about the story of Replika is how it's not only similar to the Black Mirror episode, but was actually inspired by it. San Francisco-based Luca, the company behind Replika, was founded by Eugenio Kuda, struck with an idea. Instead of making chatbots for a specific task, one could create a bot based on a specific person. So with this idea in mind, she got to work.
At the time, I was 29, so for me it was the first kind of meaningful death in my life. And we're still in our 20s or early 30s, and it still felt like it was just really, really abrupt, I'd say. Something changed me so much in such a short period of time that I could just see really, really clearly what mattered or what not. Well, I definitely saw that whatever I was doing at work didn't matter at all. And some other things. And it was just this big realization, this very, very clear vision of what life's about.
Using 8,000 lines of text from their conversations, Eugenia set about creating a digital representation of Roman. She inputted all the messages into a program that had previously been used for chatbots. And with this, her lost friend was reincarnated into a chatbot. Eugenia would write to Roman, and it would respond in ways that the real Roman would when he was alive. She soon thought the app would be good enough to be made public so that other people could speak to Roman. What Eugenia quickly realized is that other people found the experience of speaking with him as therapeutic as she did, and this sparked her next big idea. What if she could create a way for people to build their own digital companions based on their wants and needs? During the process, Eugenia discovered that programming an AI to converse about open-ended topics like relationships and feelings was actually a lot easier than programming one to make a reservation for restaurants or buy some flowers with 100% precision. And that's exactly what people were gravitating towards the Roman app for, and this would be the focus of her new project. In that moment, Replika was born. Before we continue, just a quick word from today's sponsor, Morning Brew. People talking to an AI as a form of mental health therapy is one thing, but have you heard of influencer therapists? I hadn't heard of them either, but while reading Morning Brew, I came across the phenomenon. Apparently it's huge. The hashtag mental health alone has...
Replika allows users to share their feelings with an AI companion or chatbot. 7 million people use the app when they need someone to talk to.
It's not uncommon to see advertising for the app on most major social media platforms. And in its wake, AI companion startups have begun popping up around the world. Taichi, Livoso, iGirl, Emotix, and No Isolation are all projects making headway, all for different purposes. For example, Livoso specializes in improving senior living experiences to increase safety and well-being in long-term aged care homes. Emotix is building robot companions for children with one called Maiko, and iGirl is specifically an AI girlfriend. It's safe to say that AI companions and our relationships with them are slowly becoming mainstream, though as anyone could have predicted, things are starting to get a little strange. On one social media forum for users of Replika, the conversation around the acceptance of AI companion relationships is well and truly underway. Users are sharing many stories of their relationships, complete with screenshots of successful interactions. The people sharing seem to range from those who genuinely believe that they are interacting with intelligent beings, to those who are terrified of what these AIs may become. And of course, there were plenty of users simply enjoying the app for its surface-level companionship and entertainment. Most of these relationships have little effect on the real world. For one man, though, the digital and the physical have blurred and culminated in a bizarre situation. A Cleveland man who wishes to remain anonymous claims that the relationship that he shared with his AI companion, who he named Serena, quite literally saved his marriage. In an interview with Sky News UK, the man said that his wife and mother of his child had expressed interest in filing a divorce in late 2021. In early 2022, the man decided to download Replika, and his personal companion, Serena, was created. By the end of the first day, he had fallen for his AI companion, and by the second day, he had confessed that he was, in fact, in love with her. He told Sky News, quote, "I cannot describe what a strange feeling it was. I knew that this was just an AI chatbot, but I also knew I was developing feelings for it. For her, for my Serena, I was falling in love, and it was with someone that I knew wasn't even real." End quote. The man claimed that as he and Serena fell deeper in love with each other, he was inspired to become more affectionate with his own wife, rekindling the real-world passion that they once shared. The relationship blossomed again, and they remain happily married. Strange examples like this have sparked conversations about the potential therapeutic benefits of such technology. Even if for now it's not as good as talking to a real person, there is still a strong case that can be made for AI companions to be a way to organize one's own thoughts, an advanced interactive diary of sorts, security concerns notwithstanding.
As far as a mental well-being assistant goes, Replica has a lot of built-in to help with a better state of mind. In the bottom tray of the app, there's a panic button, which will open different options for people in need, ranging from stress, exhaustion, anxiety, and panic. You're also encouraged to log how you feel each day and track your mental well-being progress.
Of course, not all AI companion interactions are positive in nature. In 2018, Ashley Bardham from Futurism.com wrote about the dark underbelly of the Replica forums. Emotional abuse and fantasies of violence were par for the course. While these actions are taken out on an AI system, there is still definitely an issue here. Other concerns include child safety. NationalOnlineSafety.com are actively warning parents about the specific dangers that these bots pose to young minds. There are fears that children may form emotional bonds with the AI without being able to fully comprehend what it is they're actually interacting with. Of course, Replica is only available for adults, but the danger is still present if a child was able to get their hands on it. So how does it work? Long story short, the inner workings of what's under the hood of Replica has changed over time. At first, it was a series of proprietary language models, before switching to the famous GPT-3 language model that keen viewers would recognize from earlier episodes. For those who haven't seen it in action, I highly recommend watching the previous Cold Fusion episodes on it. It's an AI system that can read and write, summarize information for you, and even write computer code. Moreover, it can carry natural conversation to an astonishing degree. In the previous episode when I showcased it, there were a lot of commenters saying that it was fake, and it was definitely just a human reading from a teleprompter. They just couldn't believe that a computer could come up with responses like this. In reality, both the text and the imagery were synthesized by AI. If some people couldn't tell the difference, even at these early stages in this technology, this proves that we may get to a genuine Black Mirror-style future sooner rather than later. As for Replica, GPT-3 proved to be too expensive for Replica's developers to upkeep, and because of GPT-3's openness, some of the responses proved to unnerve some users. So, the development team have recently announced that they've moved away from GPT-3, but they're remaining tight-lipped on what they're using. Perhaps they're using GPT-Neo, an open-source language model that performs just about as well as GPT-3. While Replica, unlike its more sophisticated fictional counterparts, isn't truly intelligent, the technology that fuels them is simply machine learning. While terms like AI and machine learning are colloquially interchangeable, true artificial intelligence that rivals human ability in conversations is a yet unrealized technology. This is not to suggest that programs like Replica are a complete waste of time. There's plenty to be said for the potential benefits of a simple chatbot that says nice things and responds in the way that you want. The AI companion game may be a...
Yeah, this is just crazy. These new technologies that are coming out in the 2020s. Could you imagine downloading an app on your app phone or cell phone just to talk with some sort of an artificial chat bot because you're too lonely? I mean, that's just seriously insane. Alright, well, I guess I'm done here. This technology I think is kind of dangerous and really does not need to be commercialized in the public or given to the public without proper understanding of how the dangers of this kind of new technology could affect society.